My true origin story really is born out of having landed there, not having found interest in sex addiction work as much as my career became a reaction against the trauma I saw that we were creating and amplifying in clients and using that model. And that's when I got trained as a sex therapist.
What if most of what you've been taught about sex, dating, and even sexual dysfunction is wrong? This was an amazing interview with Dr. Chris Donaghue. We talked about how we bypass real intimacy, fall into labels, and let pop culture shape our desires. Dr. Chris Donaghue is an internationally recognized expert in relationships and human sexuality, a certified sex therapist, and is the director of clinical education at Sexual Health Alliance. He's an author, media figure, former host of Loveline, frequent co-host on the Doctor's TV show, and has worked with Vice, CNN, VH1, and other major media outlets. His work in the media gives him insight into pop culture and mainstream narratives on sexual health. If you're ready for a more grounded, authentic, and fulfilling experience of intimacy, this one's for you. Welcome to Sexology Lab. Each week, we speak with the most compelling minds in modern sexology to ask the questions shaping the future of desire, connection, and human wellness. Let's dive in. So I want to start out with a fun question for you. So, what is one thing people would be surprised to learn about you?
It's funny. I think this one, it takes a little bit of history with me. I used to be someone, ready for this one, hold on. I was not raised with pets. So I did not understand the extreme love for pets or dogs that people have, especially in LA. LA is a very dog-centric city. People take their dogs everywhere, coffee shops, supermarkets. You'll be at Target and there's like 5 dogs running around. I mean, it's quite, really wild and profound. So I was never a dog owner. I am now, and I'm obsessed, and I get it. And our family treats our dog like a child, and I think it's a beautiful thing. And it's kind of one of those experiences until I had a pet myself, I didn't relate to it. So I guess the disclosure is I'm an extreme dog lover, but historically was very much not, and very frustrated with the continued presence of dogs everywhere I went in LA. And now I'm here for it. So.
All right. Now, I want to know, what's your 30-second origin story? When did you realize sex and relationships would become your life's work?
God, it's such a good question. I was doing general psychology, working with depression and anxiety and dynamic stuff to an extent, and really typical. And I met a friend at a treatment center. I was working part-time at an inpatient treatment center, and she was working at a sex addiction clinic, which this kind of lands itself to the possibility of furthering this story. And she said, you kind of have the characterological style of people that do really good in that work because it's very rigid, it's very boundaried. And I went over there and really found some value in some of that.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, I think my true origin story really is born out of having landed there, not having found interest in sex addiction work as much as my career became a reaction against the trauma I saw that we were creating and amplifying in clients and using that model. And that's when I got trained as a sex therapist and really began this journey that for me has been transformative, both professionally, but also personally, moving into sexual health and away from a pathology model. And I really attribute that as my origin story, having seen the darker shadow side of working with sexology and sexuality, and then being driven towards a healing component of that. And even when I'm not working as a sex therapist, specifically or directly with a client, I find that work just still working on me and having a positive impact on all the different kinds of clients I work with.
Oh, I love that. It's like the universe pushed you into that sphere.
Thankfully.
Oh.
Thankfully, because it really gave me an energy and a dynamicism that I wasn't finding clinically until then. I probably wouldn't have lasted in the field had I not got into, sex therapy. Yeah, I mean, again, not to say anything about the other kind of work, it's all very important, but I needed something, I think, a little bit on the edge.
Yeah.
Another part of my story is always living on the margins, never really participating in cultural or social normativity and finding a lot of value. And I think that's also what came out of my transition from a pathologizing sex addiction model to a sexual health, sex therapy model is a lot of that which we were shaming in the sex addiction model and calling sex addiction was things that my friends and people I cared about were engaging in. And
Yeah.
they were very healthy people, but we were trained clinically to pathologize that.
Yeah. And did you say at the beginning of your story that somebody said like you really like a rigid framework?
Yes.
Okay, so that's like not the first thing I think of when I think of you.
Speak to that. Tell me why. What does that mean?
Because I think you do such a good job of understanding people and like adapting to what they need and what's going on with them. I feel like you're more of like a flexible therapist who like really understands people, doesn't jump in with like a rigid framework and says this is what we have to do. I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you
thank you
think?
for pointing that out. And I think that's part of the healing intra personally, that moving into the sex therapy world really impacted me because I think historically I was more by the book and very rigid. And that's what the sex addiction model is about. It's really about learning
Mhm.
the model. And I remember having that said to me by my clinical director at the time. He said, "You're not practicing the model, like you're pushing on those boundaries." And that was that part of me that you see now trying to kind of, I think, like birth, right? And it was like really being held in there. And so I think at that time of my life I wasn't living authentically myself and I was still new to the field. And so I think it was just me developing, but I love being seen that way. Thank you for seeing me that way, because that's how I want to be. I really want to be someone who finds the value and beauty and health and creativity and diversity relationally, sexually, and otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you really do.
Thank you.
All right, I want to talk for a moment about pop culture. So, what are some sexual health trends that you're noticing right now in the media and in pop culture?
I love this question. It's like you sat in my psyche and you said, "What are all the things Chris hates?" I hate pop culture. The minute you said pop culture, I was like, "Ugh." I'll answer your question, but I traumatize pop culture. I think a lot of things that fall under that heading, and I know at times my career and some of the media I've done make me at times a part of pop culture. I see it as accommodating really problematic norms and values. And that's what a lot of people really want. And I think that's problematic. For example, to answer your question, a couple things. Number one, the misapplication and misuse of the word trauma and
Mm,
calling anything uncomfortable as being traumatic or my trauma.
yeah.
I think that's problematic in pop culture. Also, not considering intent and impact. And I think some people want to let go of accountability if they had a good intention. But I also think the inverse is really important to talk about, which is we can sometimes harm someone, but not have maybe meant to and still might have been a good person that made a mistake. And we can't vote everyone off the island when they make a mistake, if that's truly what it is. And intent has to also be taken into account. And also, I think the word trigger, everyone is
Ooh.
using this word trigger. I was triggered, that's triggering. And the misunderstanding that a trigger shows us where our work, if we're triggered by something, that doesn't mean the person who triggered us is bad or wrong or has work to do. First, it's about turning to self and saying, should that be triggering? How can
Yeah.
I heal that trigger? How can I soften that wound that that person didn't create but unearth? That's my work. So I think those are the pieces. I also wish we would stop watching so much reality television, which really normalizes and reinforces really bad communication and relational skills. That would be my
Hmm.
verbal vomit.
Oh, I love it. I totally agree. All right. Now, you mentioned you've been in the media. So, you've had a very public facing career in sex therapy, radio,
At times.
TV, at times. Yeah. And so, how did you get into the media space? How did you land there?
Oh my God. Well, first off, it's the Wild West. And I tell people don't get into the field trying to get into media. It's something that I think kind of finds you, and not everyone's really built for it. And there's a really toxic shadow side to it. And I think it's hard to hold on to yourself, because what happens is if you develop any media facing brand or profile, and if you get any number of followers of any size, a lot of people start reaching out and really wanting to exploit and take advantage of that. And it's really hard to hold on to a mission statement and having ethics and values, because entertainment, its job is first and foremost to entertain. It isn't driven by ethics and values. And so in my early media career, when I was doing some television, some small scale, some large scale, it's hard to hold on to yourself when you have a team of producers and a network trying to get you to say and do things that really don't align with your values or mental health work, such as calling people sex addicts, also promoting products that harm. And so that's what comes up for me, and people bring up media. And I've kind of backed away from a lot of it because I find it exhausting. It's an LA thing. I was in LA, I was with a friend, and they were taking a meeting with a production company. This is now 15 years ago, maybe. And as I was sitting there killing time, one of the producers was like, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm a sex therapist." And they're like, "Really? Tell me more." And as I was talking about the work I do, they were like developing a show, and it wound up going to air for a couple seasons. And so it's kind of an LA moment where you stumble upon things.
Yeah, yeah.
So strange, but that's how it happens here. You can't really go looking for it. I think it has to kind of find you. And I think the best people in media are the ones that are open to it and they're willing to participate in it, but they're not hungry for it and they're not living and dying by it and they have a career otherwise. I always kept my clinical career, even when I was doing a show, doing a top podcast, writing books, speaking at conventions. I was like, keep your foundation. That's going to ground you. That also helps you really continue to develop as a clinician. And that's really what keeps you floating, both as a clinician, but also in media. Have something to say. I think those are the really good media people. So I think it was a culmination of just being in LA, right place at the right time, but also having a message and knowing who I was and having a mission statement. And that's also what I tell people: have a mission statement, know what your ethics are, know what you're trying to do, hold on to that. And I think that's really good clinically and otherwise.
Yeah, that is really good advice because we probably have a lot of people listening to this who want to be involved in the media in some capacity,
Yeah.
whether it's social media, writing articles, being interviewed by TV stations. And I think that's really good advice. Have a mission and stick to your ethics and also keep doing the clinical work.
Yeah. And another concept I am worried about is that media doesn't, nor do followers, they don't really care often about who is speaking. And what I mean by that is I've been on professional panels, I've been on media driven panels, I've been on panels for products, and it's such an odd diversity of people, with everything from truly credentialed, trained individuals like myself to people that made up some bizarre label within the sex and mental health field. Like, I'm a mental health advocate. That doesn't mean anything. Or I'm a health coach. That doesn't inherently speak to any kind of training or education. And so you have to be very thoughtful about who you're listening to. Everyone has a voice now. And I think that that can be really bad. And in the field of psychology, we talk a lot about operating within your scope of practice and your scope of competence. So, scope of practice means if you're not trained in something, you shouldn't be considering or calling yourself an expert. What is your education? What are your certifications? What kind of supervision have you had? And if you've had none of that, you're not an expert. And then, even within the field within which you're an expert, you have to practice within your scope of competence. Are you trained specifically in that? Like, therapists and psychologists are not trained in sexology or sex therapy, and they shouldn't be practicing in that area. People like ourselves that are certified and trained and have supervision, clinical experience, and all of that are the ones that should. And the consumer needs to start asking more questions, because media will put them all on television, not even looking at what their background is and how competent they are. And I think it's getting a little messy. And that's part of the pop culture problem is if you have a big following, people think that means that you know something. And I hear a lot of problematic, erroneous things being put out there.
Absolutely.
That's my
Especially,
warning.
I love it. And it's so true, especially like everyone has access to social media and you don't know who you're listening to. You just see reels popping up and memes and, all different things. And it's not real clinical advice.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And again, the work is really interesting. So that's also what I would say to someone: do the work, go to school, get some certifications, get some trainings, join a program, get some clinical experience, really be robust and good at what you do.
Yeah. So you do a lot of different things. So you're in academic spaces and you're also in the therapy room. And so which one feels more like home?
Oh, so good. This answer kind of says both in a way. I think for me, what's really beautiful is that both domains and media at times as well, I lose myself in flow and I really love the work I do. You can see only some of the books behind me and I've read them all and I'm always researching and studying and I have so much passion for the topics within which I speak publicly and work with clinically. And so when I get to lose myself in that work, that feels like home. And so for some days clinically, I can find home there. And sometimes it's more of the academic and the teaching and really
Yeah.
getting to work on a really deep or very intellectual level with these materials and theories that I'm so passionate about. But it's circular because I love the academic where we're dissecting them and critically challenging them and looking at why. And then I love bringing it back to the clinical and actually getting to work with and apply those concepts and really get my hands dirty. So I feel like it's a big feedback loop
Yeah.
and one informs the other. And I think you just asked me that question because I hadn't really thought about it in that way or been asked that. And what a blessing. And I do try to, I really truly do. I'm not just saying this in response to the question, but I try to really like return to the gratitude of getting to be a part of a field that I value and I love. Because for a lot of people, unfortunately, their jobs might not be that being a part of a system in whatever way, even like your job, like
Yeah.
you get to be part of this and engaging deeply with this really cool system that I hope even for you on a really hard, stressful day, you're able to sit back and say, directly and indirectly, my work really gets to be a part of creating change on different levels. And like, what a beautiful thing that not everyone is able to get to do. And so that feels like home. After a hard day, I'm like, but I did something.
Oh, I love that
And you get
answer.
that.
I
You know, you're in
do.
it with us.
I know. I get to talk to so many incredible people. As you know, there's many different pieces of what I do. So
Well, because side note, for
I
anyone who doesn't know Michelle, Michelle is like the exoskeleton woven into everything that happens at Shaw. Like you have a presence in all of it. And I always find you very grounding and stabilizing. Like things can get chaotic, and Michelle's always very anchored and rooted and reliable. And so, like, you have a hand in everything Shaw driven. So, yes.
thank you. I appreciate that. That's really good feedback.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I love learning from people and I love facilitating that education for others. It's so important, the work that we're doing in the field and watching all of these people graduate and go through our program and learn and pass that on to other people. It's just very rewarding.
Yes. Yes. And where it's all going to go, I don't know. More and more people are entering the field, and I hope that becomes a beautiful thing and not a bad thing. I hope that
Hmm.
that makes the work more robust and doesn't water it down somehow.
Yeah.
I remember when I got into this field over 2 decades ago, it was still very marginal and pathologized, even within the clinical world at large. Why do you want to work with sex? You know, something must be wrong with you. You must be
Mm.
sex obsessed. And now it's been very normalized, and I hope that that's a good thing. I hope that's a good influence, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I know. We'll just keep steering it to the positive.
We're going to try.
We're
We're
going to
going to
try.
try. I don't know what the next wave is, but we're going to try.
Right. Are you curious about sexology? Do you want to further integrate sexology into your work or your life? Well, friends, then we've got something just for you. It's called the Sexology Practice Guide, and it walks you through the ways this shows up in your work, in your life, and guides you through working within your scope, incorporating intimacy and sexual health into your work without starting over. Download this short, practical guide at sexologylab.com/guide. That's sexologylab.com/guide. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe and share. And now, back to the show. All right, now I want to do a little education in this episode, and I want to talk about the topic you shared with us at our last annual sexological conference on sexual bypassing. So, for anyone who's new to that, could you define that for us? What is sexual bypassing?
Yeah, it's so funny to hear you throw that back to me, having spoken on it, written about it. I'm like, I don't even know. Being out in the world and clinical practice, I was noticing that people would see themselves as a participant in sex or
Mhm.
eroticism. And yet, in the way that they were perceiving it and engaging it, they were actually almost bypassing it. What does that mean? So, our culture and our brain really loves and thrives on categorization. This is
Oh,
one
yeah.
angle I'll start with, right? We love categorizing. What is your gender? What is your sexual orientation? Even within sex outside of orientation, are you a dom? Are you a sub? Are you a top? Are you bottom? Like all of these lines. And that's very anxiety driven. And one of the things I started to notice in doing this work is that we talk in the neurology field now, and this is very commonplace, about neuroplasticity. We used to think way back when that the brain stopped growing at a certain point in time, around 24, 26. It was very cliche. Now we know that the brain has the capacity to grow and change through the lifespan. Sexuality is that way as well. And my point in the bypassing is a lot of people, what they perceive themselves or who themselves to be sexually is really more about habit and pattern, and that's what they're most comfortable doing, and that our sexuality is a little bigger than that, and that if we could stop seeing what kind of like the window of tolerance, that there's growth in asking at least, why do I do what I do? And why do I avoid what I avoid? And what part of me is avoiding that? And so let me give a clinical example for those that are like, this is word salad. My gay clients will talk about these hard lines like, I'm a top, I'm a bottom. Well, no. You are most comfortable and you have been in the habit of bottoming, but it makes you anxious to imagine topping. Why? What psychologically does that require that you feel like you don't have? And how are we actually avoiding really dropping into eroticism and intimacy by having these hard lines? And that applies to everyone. You know, David Schnarch, who's no longer with us, had this soundbite that sat with me for years, and he called it leftover sex, where we'll take off the table what makes us anxious. The partner will take off the table what makes them anxious, and we'll just do what's left over. And that's
Oh,
boring.
yeah.
And that's anxiety management. And as a clinician, I love the idea of looking at what makes us anxious and why, and how can we lean into that. And that's what sexual bypassing really seeks to do, is it seeks to make deeper meaning out of the ways that we are sexual. And instead of saying that's just who and how I am, instead looking at that as anxiety maintenance, looking at that as the confines of all that I can tolerate. But again, there's growth in going outside of that. So all the couples I work with, gay, straight, asexual, it's all about pushing on our boundaries and expanding and trying to step outside of that. And I feel like, one of the reasons why I love sex therapy and sexology is using sex as an assessment and diagnostic tells us everything about someone in a way nothing else does. So when I'm working with a client and I'm learning about their sexuality, I'm learning everything. I'm learning their body esteem and their self esteem, where the issues are, where the work is based on what they'll allow to be seen and touched and engaged, or what must be avoided. I'm working with and learning about their trauma, the interpersonal stuff. We're learning about how much intimacy they can tolerate. It's all in there.
Yeah.
And so I want the takeaway just to be, however you define yourself, with whatever words you would use, extrovert, introvert, sex driven, and otherwise, that is usually about your anxiety, how you need to be perceived. And it is about a habit and a pattern, and that we are more than that. And let's get deeper in. Because one of my big fears is that the sex therapy field is going a little bit too medical, as though it's a medical issue, that there's a problem and let's solve it. Let's take this pill, let's take this treatment. And that is the biggest example of sexual bypassing. We are bypassing doing the work. We are bypassing and doing the psychological, sexological work. And those tools and those pills and those tricks will fail you. Your brain, your anxiety will override that pill, that injection, that technique. That's why I don't teach pills, injections, and techniques. That's sexual bypassing. I want us to do that work, right? Why is that a problem? What does that problem say about you? Is it even a problem? How's that problem that you claim to be an issue defined and based on limits? So that's my word salad. Is that
Yeah.
clear? Did that make any sense?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. It did.
What?
Yeah. No, and I want to know too, like for the anxiety piece, are there
Yes.
common themes that you see a lot working with clients? Like what's causing this anxiety the most? Or is everybody just a little bit different? Or is it both?
The same and also different. I mean, Everyone tends to fall in culturally one of two categories: conformity or authoritarianism, meaning we either want to do what everyone else is doing or we do what we're told to do. And so this is where I love Jungian psychology and psychoanalytics. I want everyone to work on individuation, meaning truth, authenticity lives outside what everyone else is doing and what we've been told to do. And that also is how people wind up sexual bypassing. We're afraid to be our weird, creative, capital Q queer selves. Queer does not mean gay, it means non normative. You can be hetero queer, gay queer. It's this anti normativity. And as a species, we're so weird and there's so much beauty in that, but everyone wants to fit in. And that's what we do with what we wear. That's what we do with how we act. That's what we do with our sexuality. We don't want to be as vulnerable as it is when we stand on our own and we say, this is what I'm into, or this is who I am, or this is what I like to wear, or this is what I look like. I remember, couldn't tell you where or when because I am blessed and I get to speak a lot, but I was somewhere last year. It might have been a Shaw event, I don't remember.
Yeah.
And when I was speaking, I was saying, pretty much 9 out of 10 people that are going to the gym are doing it for conformity driven reasons. The image they have of how they want to look is conformist. And that isn't inherently bad or wrong, but it's interesting to me that we are afraid of just being ourselves and looking the way we look, and we keep wanting to fit in. And that's what I think pop culture is about. Is pop culture is that thing that you are being led to believe is important and healthy and real and true, and you need to look that way, dress that way, listen to that music. And it's the death of truth. And that's why I hate pop culture. It's a bypassing, right?
Yeah.
And so our anxiety is about just being our true selves. Everyone coming into therapy deep, 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 deep down is just trying to work on being okay as they are, and they just want to feel normal. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but I think the work is about not trying to be normal. It's about being confident in your abnormality, and that the problem itself is the seeking of normal and trying to be normal, right? And that's the issue with the weight loss industry, which is so toxic, and these GLP-1s, which are so toxic, and the sex therapy techniques, because the Viagra's and all these pills and techniques are still saying you need to be a certain way. And until you are, and if you aren't, there's something wrong with you. And that isn't true. And I'm afraid the field is going towards correction, which is the medicalization.
Yeah.
I want the doctors to get out of the psychological field and let us clinicians do the psychological work of making people realize you don't need to operate like that. You don't need to look like that. There's no right way to be sexually, and to move away from that. But a lot of people are still being trained in fixing.
Yeah. And I think this is a lifetime worth of work that people have to do. When you were talking, it made me think of like when I was a kid, especially when you're a teenager and everybody's trying to make you fit into a certain mold or a group, or you don't really get to authentically be yourself because everybody wants you to be a certain way.
Yes. And then we get into adulthood and sadly aren't necessarily spared that. I remember when I was a kid, I had this moment with my grandmother. And at this point, this is probably like, let's say a decade ago. And this woman is, I don't know, in her 70s, maybe her 80s. She bought and wore her first pair of jeans because as a young girl, she was taught women don't wear pants, but absolutely don't wear denim jeans. I never heard of such a thing, right?
Wow.
And finally, at that later stage in life, was like, I'm going to do some version of me. That hurts my heart because that's such a profound move for her. So I'm so proud of her for that move. But what a tiny thing, right? And there's probably so many other elements. And I think we take that into our adulthood. And that's why, again, not to talk again about Jungian psychology, but it says that there's 2 phases of life and they are not chronological. They're not bound by age. They're just bound by where you are. And not everyone ever moves into the second phase. And the second phase is what he calls individuation, stepping outside of cultural norms and saying, but what do I like? What do I want to wear? What do I want to listen to? What do I want to eat? How do I want to have sex? What kind of partner do I want to be with? And not everyone always gets there. Some people stay in the first phase, which is about how do I look? How much money do I make? What are my friends? It's about form. It's about materialism. Second phase is about, am I living life the way I want? It's about philosophy and looking at your legacy. And that's what I'm trying to move into, where I'm desperately trying to live as true as possible. And again, that is stepping outside of pop culture. I got a real big issue with pop culture, as you can
Yeah.
tell. I
Yeah.
just think it's a big constellation of mess. And when I look at the values it's promoting, it's materialism and looksism and fat shaming and body shaming and racism and homophobia and classism. And like, it's just a
Mhm.
problem. Yeah, that's where my brain goes with that thinking.
Yeah. And what do you think about dating apps? Do you think that like dating apps have an impact on sexual bypassing? People are trying to optimize themselves for the apps.
Oh, I love that you're using that word. Anytime I hear that word, hustle culture, optimization, maxing, get up at 5 a.m., be on the treadmill by 5:30, take your shake by 7, blah, blah, blah. It's a mess. I think the apps are beautiful on one hand because we have access to a wealth of people that prior to apps we wouldn't have had. We had to
Yeah.
meet people at the local supermarket, I don't know, the bar. Now you
Yeah.
can meet them around the world. But I think that's the problem. I think the bigger problem is the flaws and the shadow side of it, which is that you have higher expectations and people are dating using searchable qualities like you do when you're looking
Mhm.
for a pair of pants online. What's the length? What's the cut? What's the color? Sold, right? But
Right.
people can't be bound by those attributes. And in fact, I think we misrepresent ourselves in some of those attributes where people will say, I'm like this. This is how my personality is. And it isn't. And so I think it does reduce people down to, yeah, objects and searchable qualities. This is what I tell my clients. I tell my clients to ignore people's bios because that's their own self representation, which is going to be optimized and they're going to speak from the best in themselves. And who knows, ignore all of that. And I tell them to the best they can, leave their bio pretty vague as well, and to actually
Yeah.
just find someone you're attracted to, go out into the world and sit with them and see what it feels like. Because you don't need to date someone that's a certain height. That's your ego. Your ego needs them to
Mhm.
be a certain height. Let's move on and get over that. And a lot of the qualities that people ask and talk about are their ego. And it's called an ego list. Anyone who says, here's what I'm looking for in a partner, I'm like, that's your ego. That's your anxiety again. That's what you think you need. Why do you need a partner that's 6 foot or taller? What does that have to do with anything? That's your ego. Why do you need them to? And we fill in all these blanks. Go just meet them. Go sit with them. It's not about compatibility in terms of similarity or differences. It's not about that. We have really robust research that tells us a good partner is someone who's willing to do the work, and a good partner is someone who is best assessed in times of conflict. That's
Yeah.
what I tell all my couples. The health of a couple is based on how they manage hard moments and conflict. That's one of the key of a few keys that you want to really assess. It has nothing to do with whether or not you both like basketball. It has nothing to do with
Yeah.
how tall they are. It has nothing to do with if they're a top and you're a bottom. It has nothing to do with how much money they make. None of that has to do with what they're like as a partner. What are they like when your parent passes as a support network? What are they like when you've had a hard day? What are they like when you've had a great day and you want to go just run around like a kid? What are they like when you have a need? Right? Like that's what
Yeah.
matters, not all the other things that we put in our bios. So I think that leads us astray. And I think the app should be used quicker, where you connect with someone. I find you attractive. You find me attractive. There's some element of interest. Let's meet as soon as possible and let's really see what it's like to share space. Let's see what comes up in my nervous system. Let's see what it's like to experience the world together. Go out a few times, allow
Yeah.
some difference to emerge. One of my favorite statements is date to be known, not to be liked. People go on dates thinking my job is for them to like me and for me to get them. That's I'll wear what I think they want me to wear. I'll talk about what I think they want me to talk about. No, go as yourself and see if that lands. And a successful date is sometimes realizing I was myself, hopefully they were themselves, and it's not a match. That's success.
Yeah.
So when I was dating, I would bring my best within the scope of who I really am. But like, for instance, I'm a very casual person. So I'm not taking you to a bougie restaurant for dinner. That's not who I
Yeah.
am. I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
you to know what I'm really like. I dress very casually outside of the office. So I'm going to be wearing a t-shirt and sneakers because that is how I dress in the world. And I want you to see what I'm like. I'm not going to pretend I know Taylor Swift. I couldn't name a song she sings, but I did go to the Nine Inch Nails concert, and I do want to talk about the soundtrack album they just released. And if that's not a match, great to know.
Right. I love this is like the realest thing I have heard in a long time. So I met my husband on a dating website. This was before apps. Okay. This is like 16 years ago. We met,
Wow.
yeah, we met on a website and we were just talking about this weekend. I had all the little things. Like he has to be over 6 foot. He has to be older than me. And like I wasn't matching with anyone. And so like I was like, okay, fine. Like let's expand the search criteria to somebody who's like 2 or 3 years younger than me. I guess I could date somebody younger. And sure enough, my husband popped up and we went out and we clicked, but we almost didn't meet because of my rigid criteria. And then I asked him, I was like, what was your criteria? He's like, I didn't have any. I just figured I would meet somebody and we would click. And
I
so,
love this.
yeah,
I
it was
love
great.
this. And good for you. And congrats to you, because had you not gotten out of your own way, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet someone like that. And that's usually how great matches emerge, is they were far outside of what our ego and anxiety told us we had to have.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
That's beautiful. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
16
Thank
years
you.
later, here you are.
I know, here we are. And what you were saying about like the some person who's going to be with you in the hard times, that's
Yes.
like the realist thing, you know, because in 16 years we've had some very hard times. And like you want that person who's going to be by your side and, you know, sit with you when you're suffering. And, you know,
Yes.
it's not about them being 6'3" and about, you know,
How
them,
big their penis is and how much
right?
money they make and how
It,
masculine they are. And only you, at 16 years in, can really, really say that to someone in the most profound way. I promise you, you're saying
Mhm.
what matters is how they show up in the stages of a 16-year lived life,
Yeah.
hard times and happy times. And none of that has to do with any of those searchable qualities that we obsess
Yes.
about.
No,
Yes.
none of it. You know, money changes, jobs change, you know, careers
Yes.
change, all those
Our
things change.
bodies change, our
Our
level of
bodies,
attractiveness
yes.
changes.
Hmm.
Yes, yes. And
Yep.
that's what you want, someone who understands and allows humanity. Because however I look today is not how I'm going to look a decade from now. I could lose mobility. I could
Mhm.
lose mental functioning from a medication I have to take. Life events occur, and you want to be with someone who has that flexibility and understands that love is far bigger than those aspects. Good for you. I'm in a very healthy relationship like that as well.
Yes,
So
I love it.
that's the takeaway I want people to have. That was, yeah, I'm so glad
Yeah.
you had that experience as well. We need more of that. Talk about that more to others, please.
Yes, I
Help
will.
change that,
Yeah.
yeah, piece.
Yeah. And that's the piece of the story I've never really like explored, you know, with people. It's always like, oh, how fun we met on a dating website, you know, but it's not that piece. And I think that is
No.
important.
Yeah, because I know your story really quickly, and I know that you've relocated and you've moved and you're in this industry, and like you found someone that has that durability. Because that's what I'll say to clients: find someone who's willing to do the work with you. Like look for someone who's workable, right?
Now, what is the thing that professionals, like other sex therapists, need to know about sexual bypassing when working with their clients?
I want other clinicians and sex therapists to know that clients are going to come in thinking something's wrong or broken, and that the therapy should fix it and correct it and get them back to this idea of how they think they're supposed to be, because that's how everyone is but isn't actually, and that's not the work. The work isn't about becoming something else. The work isn't about correcting or fixing. The work is about normalizing how they are. Let me give you an example, and this comes up a lot on podcasts. So I wrote an article, I think it's on my website, and I can't remember the name. It's something about the myth of like erectile dysfunctions. And the
Mm,
word I use is there's no such thing as an erectile dysfunction. It's erectile disappointment.
yeah,
That's what I want clinicians to understand and to
yeah,
apply that thinking beyond. What that means is your penis isn't dysfunctional. That implies what it's doing is wrong and there's a right way. Says who and how? What is this magical right way? Where did you come up with that? It's a disappointment. And learning how to be confident and allow, in this example, a penis to ebb and flow. Erections should not be expected to operate like a dildo, which is this magical idea we have that we're trying to fix. It's a dysfunction. It's
right.
not getting hard and staying hard in the ways I want or I think it should. Where did you get the ideas as to how you thought it should operate? A healthy penis has a lot of variability. Arousal is a very fragile thing. It's going to ebb and flow because of and based on a multitude of factors, intrapersonally, interpersonally, environmentally. And it's not a dysfunction, it's a disappointment. We learn how to allow for that. We learn how to be confident with it as it is. We learn how to maintain participation in eroticism when our penis isn't doing what we think it should do. How can we educate our partners that our penis's functioning is not a reflection of our desire, love, or interest in them, and to back them off of that? That's the work of sex therapy healing, right? Individuating. And I think we do a disservice to a client when we agree that's right, it's a problem because it's not working the way you arbitrarily think it should. I don't know where you got the ideas how it should work. Porn, how it was when you were a teenager. I don't know,
Yeah.
but you're fine as you are. There are some rare cases, yes, rare, where that erectile issue is a sign of some deeper health and heart issues.
Sure.
But for most people, they are getting erect while masturbating. They're waking up with erections, and that is not the problem at all. It's that they haven't learned how to be confident in how it works. And that's a part of that sexual bypassing. We're not trying to get yourself erect when you want. We're not trying to be penetratively obsessed. We're trying to learn how to be erotic. We have fingers, we have tongues, we have toys. Sex is so much more than the use of genitals and penetration. That's what sex therapists need to be working on, healing, not reinforcing the problem. And when we make the penis a problem, and again, I want them to apply this metaphor to things non-penis related, to vaginas, to things that aren't even sexually driven, we are creating more anxiety. And anxiety is not going to allow the alleviation of anything because desire and arousal require safety and relaxation. The parasympathetic nervous system has to be online for all that. We have to feel safe. I have to feel confident in my body. I feel confident my partner is going to let my body operate the way it is. I'm supposed to soften into this moment, and that is what leads to erections. And we are doing the opposite when we're saying that's wrong, it needs to be a certain way. Again, I'm using a penis example, but I want that framework to be applied to a wealth of things in the mental health field, but especially around sex.
Absolutely. That's really good advice. All right. Now I want to wrap things up and ask you about Shaw's annual sexological conference. So you are the founding expert behind the conference. And so why is an in-person event like this important for professionals and our community?
Yeah, so an in-person event like this, the event in its totality is important because I think number one, we still need more places where people from the sex field in its entirety, coaches, educators, therapists, sex geeks can come together and just connect first off because it's still an under legitimized area of the field. Also, it's a place to really get sex positive and innovative resources because we have a wealth of resources, right? In the vendors that are there, but just also the attendees. The amount of beautiful learning from just some of the side conversations, because that's where the beautiful healing moment sometimes happens. Networking, getting resources, connecting, and then the lectures. We bring in world renowned lecturers. And so I wanted to be a part of because I've known and been working with Shaw for a decade. And I only do that because of how much I value the work that's being done. But again, it's a place where we are no longer just online, everything's online, it's real time. But again, the word innovative, we really seek to make it innovative, really currently driven, rooted in what's happening in the world at large, and really making it healing. Some of these comparable conferences, I think, are the ones that are going in the wrong direction. And they're moving us out of our body and into our heads and moving us towards the medical model. And I think that that's actually the death of the field. And that's the problem with the field. And so the annual sexological conference, again, is a safe space. I had people saying, this is the first time I've been at a conference where I really felt like I could be myself and I felt accepted because of the diversity of people, but also the warmth. It's such a warm space. You're there every year. You see that, you feel that. So, for someone who just wants to connect with community, I know it's such a buzzword, for someone who wants to have their mind blown with some really radical, innovative stuff, for someone who just wants to feel like they're home, for someone who wants to dip their leg and possibly moving in some form into this industry, it's such a beautiful space. And so it was really about the curation of hitting all those different elements and layers.
Oh, I love that so much. That's the feedback I hear too is, I felt like I was part of a community. I felt welcome, and that the presentations were things they weren't hearing anywhere else. Like these were things that other organizations and people weren't talking about. So we really do get that
Awesome.
innovative, curated
Yeah.
lineup of presenters.
Yeah, come out. I mean, for some people, it's their yearly vacation.
Yeah.
For others, they'll take a partner with them and they'll, do dinners with their partner. What for other people, it's their own time to themselves to go away for a couple days and just make it about them and it's the kind of self-care centered. But every year I go, I walk away having met some new friends. And like I said, sometimes it's the speakers and my mind is blown. Other times it's those side conversations that are most meaningful and transformative.
Definitely. All right. My final question for you. If you could leave one message for the next generation about sexual health, so like our Gen Zs, our little Gen Alphas that are coming up, what would that message be and why does it matter?
Keep it pleasure centered and not about performance and functioning. Ignore how you're functioning, ignoring how you're doing and how you're performing, and move clients away from that and focus on how does it feel. And that sex is like dessert. It's just supposed to feel good, be fun, and taste good. There's no right way to do it. We need to move away from there being a right way. Let it be messy. Let it be distinct. Let it be creative. Let it be authentic. Hold on to that.
That's such good advice. All right. Dr. Chris Donaghue, thanks for being with us today. It
Thanks
was
for
a
having me.
pleasure. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. Links are in the description below.